Okay, this is chapter 1 with the new book, America Narrative History. And we're going to go through the notes. And if you need to pause and write anything down, feel free. Okay, so the first question that you guys read about was what were the major patterns of American Indian life before Europeans arrived? I know I mentioned this in class, but this is one of the major focuses for College Board right now is what was the Native American civilizations, or what were the major Native Americans civilizations like before Europeans arrived. So for the early history, the settling of the Americas, for the overall culture, to say that the Native Americans or the early Americans were one group is pretty incorrect, because it's kind of like saying everybody in Europe was part of one group. They're very different. There's a lot of characteristics and beliefs and things that are very unique to each different region. Previous assumptions had been that early settlers, early people had come across the Bering Strait, a land bridge later submerged by rising sea levels, and those early inhabitants were nomadic. They were usually spear-wielding hunters. They moved south in search of large game. And this is something, as they move more into the continent and disperse, it's going to set up to where they don't have those immunities to European diseases, to those communicable diseases that are going to take such a huge toll later on. Some of the recent discoveries, though, have said that maybe in Pennsylvania, Virginia, other places, that some of the prehistoric humans may have even arrived earlier, so much as 40,000 years earlier from parts of Asia, possibly even some that crossed the ocean from Europe. So overall major theme, though, for that European arrival, early history is going to be a lot of immigration, a lot of movement. For the pre-Columbian Indian civilizations, the first people in North America were going to discover a very diverse environment, climate. They developed communities, spoke hundreds of languages. Not each of them were able to speak hundreds of languages, but there were hundreds of languages represented overall. They created extensive trade networks. They weren't always getting along. There was lots of warfare. They exploited the environment sometimes. But the early cultures were those of nomadic that will eventually transition into more permanent villages in certain areas. Changes in climate and extensive hunting will often lead to them killing off some mammals, especially some of the very large mammals, and having to find new ways of feeding themselves. Sometimes that meant growing crops or just moving to find more game. The ancient Indians are going to adapt to culture with more nature-centered religions. They're going to master the use of fire, improve their technology, using spear points, certain kinds of snares, domesticating animals. And most native religions are going to hold that a single creator stood atop the spiritual hierarchy for them. Shaman or medicine men, religious leaders, had a lot of position of authority within those communities and those civilizations. They start to introduce things with farming, fishing, pottery, and the first agricultural revolution that happens in 5000 BC is going to be in Mexico, growing plants. Maize, which is corn, beans, squash, chili peppers, avocados, pumpkins are all part of this agricultural revolution that's going to make that transition from a more nomadic society to a more permanent society. Some of the early groups, the Mayas, the Aztecs, the Incans, early villages in Mexico, northern Guatemala, some of these permanent settlements, they have religion, crafts, art, science, government. For the Mayans, they developed math, astronomy, an accurate calendar, actually more accurate than Europeans. It was highly developed society and city. The collapse of the Mayan civilization in 900 AD, possibly due to overexploited resources, too much farming, deforestation, widespread erosion, overpopulation, took their toll on that society, and they were not able to sustain their society beyond that point. Aztecs arrived and found the city of Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City, 1325. They will eventually expand their control over tribes in central Mexico. They develop commerce with gold, silver, copper, certain crops and fruits that were unique to the region. They developed a network of roads, had over 5 million people within their city, their civilization, their control. To the south, the Incas rule about 12 million people. They have diplomacy. They use marriage alliances among the tribes, military conquest. interconnect their roads, their buildings. They have farms, developing, like the Aztecs, like the Mayans, a more developed civilization than you're going to see in some of the Native Americans to the north, in Northern America, or farther north. When the Europeans arrive, it's a very wide variety of Native people, and like I said, they're not one solid group, one culture. They're very unique and very different. Those in the to the north of the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas, they don't have the grand scale. They don't have the literacy. They perfect farming, hunting, fishing, develop political and religious structures. They share an ideology with sacredness of nature, necessity for communal living, respect for elders, value generosity as an overall trend with these groups. In the Pacific Northwest, that's in California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, more fishing, whaling, hunting, a little bit of farming. They're woodworkers. The social divisions include chiefs, commoners, slaves. In Mississippi, I think Mississippi River with river valleys, they build large towns around central plazas and temples. They have a specialized labor system, government structure, trade network. And then in the Southwest, more irrigation based, needing to use that irrigation for warmer, drier climates. They build dams and canals to gather, distribute water. A lot of them live in pueblos. They're called the Pueblo Indians. And for this, that's in the Southwest. And then the Eastern Woodland tribes, Algonquin. Those are fishers. They're really good hunters. They use dugout canoes, live in the wigwams. Some of the others are going to have more agriculture. They grew corn. They use bark-covered longhouses, multiple family clans living within them. And many Native American tribes overall were very matriarchal, meaning they follow the mother's line, and so women did have a pretty prominent role a lot of times within society. Okay, the next question. This was a good visual, was showing how they dispersed throughout the continent as they came across the Bering Strait, which is right here. Okay, the next question was to identify the reasons why European countries looked west across the ocean. Why did they want to explore? And many of them dreamt of abundance, riches, saw America as, in their imagination, a religious refuge, a society of equals, a place for power and glory, a place for cities, a place just to kind of explore and the adventure of it all of that coming together. And the Vikings in the 10th and 11th centuries, starting with Eric the Red colonizing west coast of Greenland, which was actually rocky and covered in ice, but he said it was green to try to get more people to come and colonize. And then later his son, Leif Erikson, who sailed south to Newfoundland, and those colonies do vanish by the 15th century, but they were among those that were first to set up colonies. And you can see on the map right there some of those tracks right there. The expansion of Europe was a big part of this. New technology, navigation, kind of fuel for this drive for exploration. They used full-rigged ships for long voyages, more accurate maps, navigation techniques using the compass and the quadrant to determine more accurate locations. They had better weapons in case they needed those. And this age of discovery, science, growth of trade, all of this is going to just be more of a drive to get these people to want to go and explore and to spread their influence or to find more trade opportunities. It's a big motivator. Renaissance was a big part of it too, and having this search for knowledge and new things, and that's a big part of it as well. The growth of trade, towns, nations. Europe is going to have a drive for global exploration, following more commerce, more world trade, Mediterranean spice trade, East Asia. All that's going to give this rise to middle class, more corporations, more stockholders, and more people wanting to have that chance to have more economic opportunity. The rise of nations, nation states, kings and queens, they had the money to sponsor this search for those new places. The growth of the merchant class tied to those monarchs and the rising population. Merchants being those who trade and do business. They're going to want more money, trade laws, elimination of some of these trade barriers, and so trying to expand European trade as much as possible. There were some Chinese explorers in the 1400s, who explore the coast of Africa, but China was already a major leader, a major player in world trade, and so they really did not feel the need to spend money to sponsor overseas exploration. So that really is going to fall about 1433, and more of the responsibility of trade goes to Portugal. Marco Polo and some of those major names are going to start to look at how can we trade, how can we explore, how do I get sponsored, and that's going to be a big part of it over the next few years. Spain, with their new monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella, they were crusading Christian expansionists, wanted to take their quest to reconquer the world from when they had this reconquest of Spain from the Moors, and ensure this kind of religious unification, and to take this idea and spread that around the world, to take Spanish Empire and influence, and make that something that's going to have a lasting impact on other parts of the world. Voyages of Columbus is the last part on this one. Global expansion really began with Portugal. Prince Henry of Portugal dispatched the first expedition mapped the African coast, which was then known for lots of wealth and trade. They wanted to spread Christianity, return with spices, gold, ivory, even slaves. They had advanced sailing techniques, and then as more of these adventurers and these explorers go on, begin to fortify trade, to colonize, to inspire more European adventurers, and Columbus is among those. 1492, he finds an island east of Florida in the Bahamas, thinks he's near the Indies, and to his deathbed believed that is where he had discovered, hence the name Indians. He saw these natives as barbaric. The men were weak because they only hunted and fished. Women they saw as mistreated because of their level of work and the way that the family structure worked. So their reasoning was that the Europeans were coming to save them from their own savagery. He did find gold in what is now Haiti and the Dominican Republic and returned to Spain. After Columbus returned to Spain and reported about the findings and the Native American villages and what the potential was, he's going to go back for eventually a total of 4 voyages. Continent, though, was not named after him. Amerigo Vespucci had stated that there must be a new continent, realizing the natives were distinct people and not inhabitants of the East Indies, and the name will stick, though, from Columbus for those natives, and calling them Native American Indians, and Amerigo Vespucci had his name with the continent. Okay, the next one is identify the impact of European contact with the Western Hemisphere. What was most significant? Why? A lot of that came from the exchange, the Great Biological Exchange, also called the Columbian Exchange, exchanging plant and animal life, maize, corn. Potatoes, beans were unknown to Europe before this. The white Irish potato is actually native to South America, but these plants and these crops were helpful with worldwide population, actually grew population because they could actually feed these people. Corn could grow almost anywhere, and so a dramatic increase in population, surplus population, meant more people to colonize the New World. Diseases, however, smallpox, influenza, measles, typhus were most significant in the exchange, and tens of millions will die from the contagions. They were unable to fight the diseases. Their bodies didn't have the ability to fight diseases. And so estimated Native American population between 50 to 90 million will be decimated to eventually 2, maybe 5 million people because of the impact of disease. Religious and tribal leaders are going to lose a lot of their authority and hold over tribes because they couldn't explain the diseases. They had no power over them. They have no way of curing them. And so they lose a lot of their authority within the tribes themselves. Professionals, explorers, after the spread of information, Gutenberg Press kind of taking that written word and spreading it around. After Columbus, more European expeditions with this right of discovery to claim territory. Spain, Portugal, France, Britain, Netherlands, Russia are going to go and explore more. John Cabot, Venetian, sponsored by Henry VII in England, discovered more of North America in 1497. Newfoundland in Canada, and I'm going to continue on part 2.